Today is the review day for the Unit 1 test. Do people have a preference for the last thing they taste? Researchers at the University of Michigan designed a study to find out. The researchers gave 22 students 5 different Hershey's Kisses in a random order and asked the students to rate each one. Participants were not told how many kisses they would taste. However, when the 5th and final kiss was presented, participants were told it would be their last one. Of the 22 students, 14 of them gave the final kiss the highest rating. If the participants in the study do not have a special preference for the last kiss they try, what % of the students should pick the last candy? We had 5 candies, so 100 divided by 5 would be 20%. Based on the results of the study, is there evidence that people do prefer the last one they tried? Well, if you take 14 and divide that by 22, you'll get 0.64, which is 64%. So yes, the percentage is much higher than 20. Describe how you could use a spinner to simulate the results of this study, assuming that people do not have a special preference for the last kiss they tried. So you would create a spinner. With 5 sections, evenly divided. Into 1st to 5th. So that you'll have that for the order of the chocolates. The type of chocolate doesn't matter in this case. So then you would spin the spinner. Times. Taking note of how many times it lands on 5th. Plot on a dot plot and repeat many times. So they did 100 trials of the simulation, assuming that 20% will prefer the last kiss they try. Describe what information is provided by the dot plot. So you would say it shows the possible outcomes for those who prefer the last kiss. Assuming the actual percentage is 20%. Based on the results of the simulation, is there convincing evidence that people have a preference for the last thing they taste? Well, our experiment showed 14 people, so you would say yes, because 14 is not in the range of the simulation. Do cows prefer to orient themselves in a north-south direction when grazing? A study reported in the Arizona Daily Star looked at satellite images of 8,510 cattle and found that more than 60% of them were oriented in a north-south direction rather than an east-west direction. If cows have no preference for which direction they point when grazing, about how often would you expect them to be oriented in a north-south direction rather than an east-west direction? There are two different orientations, so our answer would be 50%. Based on this study, is there evidence that cows prefer a north-south orientation? Well, they found that 60% like to be north-south, whereas we expect 50%, so we would say yes, because 60% is higher than the expected 50%. Describe how you could use a spinner to simulate the results of this study, assuming that cows do not have a preference for north-south orientation. So we would create a spinner. With 50% labeled north-south and 50% labeled east-west. Spin the spinner 8,510 times. Keeping track of how many land on north-south. Plot on a dot plot and repeat many times. Here are the results of 100 trials of the simulation, assuming that 50% of the cows will prefer north-south. Describe what information is provided by the dot plot. So it shows the possible percents that prefer north-south, assuming the actual percentage is 50%. Based on the results of the simulation, is there convincing evidence that cows have a preference for north-south? And explain. They said over 60% were facing north-south, so our answer would be yes, because 60% is not within the range of the simulation. And that would be it. Researchers suspect that cows might be orienting themselves using the magnetic field of the Earth. Are there other plausible explanations for why cows might orient themselves in a north-south direction? And you could just say yes. And just say anything that makes sense to you. So they may simply like that orientation because of landscape. Remember, we can never make a definite conclusion as to why something occurs.